Chapter 1. Life never goes the way you plan. Despite your very best efforts, sometimes things just go wrong. You can try everything you think is going to work, you can plan for disaster, and you can think that you're avoiding problems. But in reality, failure is normal. It's part of human life, so no matter how much you plan your life, and especially in the work you do, many things can and still will go wrong. To fail sometimes is to be human. Life rarely goes according to plan. Accept this fact and life will flow more easily. Achal Gawande is a surgeon by trade, yet has branched out his efforts to help people across the world learn how to improve their lives in several different ways. Best-selling author of Complications and Better, Gawande has experienced many near misses, failures, and successes in his surgical career. He notes that although all surgeons have their successes and failures, it's the shock of the unexpected they talk about most. Gawande calls this necessary fallibility, basically meaning that we can't control everything in life. Some things are just beyond our control, and that opens our eyes to the fact that no matter how hard we train, how much knowledge we have, sometimes we're going to make mistakes or simply fail. Necessary fallibility is the understanding that you cannot control everything in the world, and sometimes you will make mistakes. While many things in the world are still beyond our comprehension, it's important to realize that as a human race, we've come a long way too, and there are many things that we can strive towards. There is power in this statement because by accepting that sometimes things don't go to plan, and sometimes the unexpected can throw you totally off course, you can free yourself of unnecessary pressure and focus on doing your very best. Did you know at least 4,000 surgical errors occur in the USA every year? Chapter 2. Part of being human is the ability to fail. Gawande highlights the fact that as recently as the 1950s, we didn't know how to prevent the risk of a heart attack, and we didn't really know how to treat one that effectively. As a result, the fatality rate from heart attacks was very high. We also had no clue what to do about high blood pressure and why it is so dangerous. Skip forward to 2020, and we not only understand blood pressure and how to control it, but we also have a full range of methods to help prevent heart attacks. If a heart attack does happen, there are countless ways to reduce the severity and ensure the patient goes on to live a long and healthy life afterwards. This shows that the ability of humans isn't all-knowing. It's about learning and developing. Failures happen, but that doesn't mean that the future can't be brighter if you focus on understanding more. We don't know everything, but we have the ability to learn more than we know right now. If humans have the ability to learn and develop new ways of handling complicated problems, perhaps the biggest problem that we have is human ineptitude. We have the knowledge and the skills, but we need to make sure that we're applying them in the right way and that we're thinking before we act. The volume and complexity of what we know has exceeded our individual ability to deliver its benefits correctly, safely, or reliably. Atul Gawande. Gawande talks about the possibility that a high-quality way to do that is to introduce something simple and highly effective, a checklist. Human ineptitude is a huge reason for failure. A checklist could help to capture and change this. Did you know myocardial infarction is the medical term for a heart attack, and today there is a 90% survival rate. Chapter 3. How can a simple checklist reduce the chance of failure? A checklist is a simple list of things to do in order to solve a problem. It's a simple mechanism, but it's one which can be used in many different situations. Gawande talks about hospital intensive care units. Around 50 years ago, there were far less intensive care units in the USA than there are now. Yet, this type of critical care medicine has the power to save lives. He gives one example of a couple who were out walking with their child in the Alps, and having turned their heads for just a few seconds, she fell into an icy pond and was totally unresponsive to resuscitation at the scene. Having been taken to the hospital, efforts to bring her back continued, reaching almost a 2-hour point after the incident happened. You would think that at that point she would have died. However, the technology and human skills found within that intensive care unit slowly brought her back. It wasn't a miracle, it was the power of human ability and technology working hand in hand. Gawande argues that the ability to do this comes down to not only having the right equipment and the right knowledge, but also knowing what order to complete tasks in the most effective way. This is where a checklist can help. Knowledge and skills are useless if you don't apply them in the right order and in the right way. These situations are highly complex, and there are special medical professionals all working within their particular line. If everyone follows their own checklist for regular tasks, the rate at which human error is reduced will be huge. Did you know? More than 5 million patients are admitted to US-based intensive care units every year.
Congratulations, you've hit.
Chapter 4. Aviation and checklists work hand in hand. Checklists have been used in the aviation industry for decades, helping pilots and crews to understand what to do in situations which may be unfamiliar to them, and also to help them ensure they don't miss important steps in vital tasks. In 1935, the U.S. Army Air Corps conducted a flight competition to try and choose the company they wanted to build the next long-range bomber. One particular company was very impressive, but the long-range bomber they tested that day crashed and 2 members of the crew perished. Upon analysis, there was nothing wrong with the plane and no mechanical problems. The accident happened because of human error. Rather than looking at changing the build of the aircraft or anything too complicated, they decided to simplify things instead. They created a checklist for the pilot, running through each action to be completed to taxi, takeoff, fly, and land safely and correctly. Checklists run through the simplest actions, ensuring that they are not overlooked. Even today, these checklists are completed in domestic and military flights, helping to reduce pilot error and ensuring that any situation that crops up during flight can be handled in a safe and effective way. Did you know plane crash fatalities reduced by 50% in 2019, partly due to the checklist process? Chapter 5. Using checklists to make you think twice. You might think that in high-tech industries, something as simple as a checklist is unnecessary. However, these lists provide a huge amount of protection against failure. They make you think, cause you to pause, and ensure that you've run through every necessary action, and as a result, you're cutting down on the chances of a problem rather drastically. Sometime over the last several decades, and it is only over the last several decades, science has filled in enough knowledge to make ineptitude as much our struggle as ignorance. Atul Gawande. Put simply, checklists create a sense of discipline and allow you to reach higher levels of performance. Following a checklist allows you to pause for a second and ensure all steps have been taken. An eye-opening article was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in December 2006, part of the Keystone Initiative. In this article, the findings of a study were published showing that upon introducing a checklist to nurses on how to prevent infection rates, central line infection rates in the Michigan ICU fell by a huge 66% within just 3 months. Many other similar checklists were introduced over time, helping nurses and doctors to follow simple steps, which could drastically reduce the chances of a much more serious outcome. Did you know? The World Health Organization, WHO, encourages surgeons to use checklists regularly. Chapter 6. How can checklists be used in the medical world more widely? The use of checklists in the medical world isn't a new thing, but they can be extended to a wider scope. The issue is identifying where these checklists can be useful. A study by Brenda Zimmerman of York University and Sholem Gluberman of the University of Toronto showed that there are 3 major types of problems in the world: simple, complicated, and complex. How can checklists help with these types of problems? You might think that simple problems don't tend to need checklists. These are things which we tend to do automatically, but we all have moments when we simply don't think. A checklist can capture this problem and ensure we avoid disaster. Complicated problems are not straightforward and can benefit from checklists to capture mental blocks. Even the most successful people in the world suffer from these slight blackouts occasionally. However, complex problems require several different people, specializing in their own areas. In this case, checklists can be used in order to solve the problem, but also rely upon strong communication to ensure the whole process is working. Communication is vital if you want to solve complex problems. Make sure you are clear and precise when discussing an issue or problem. Gawande mentions that Walmart is one of the best in the world at solving complex problems. They understand that you need a range of people in order to work on these issues, and you need to facilitate communication. They know that when people talk, problems are solved more effectively. So when a checklist is implemented alongside this, ensuring the basics are covered, surely the outlook is more positive. Put simply, there are no professions in which a checklist can't help. Columbus Children's Hospital trialed a checklist to help reduce the number of surgical infections. This is one of the single most common reasons for recovery problems. And to prevent it, the right antibiotic needs to be given at the right time. This was missed many times in the past. A checklist was introduced to ensure that all the correct steps were taken, and as a result, 89% of patients were successfully treated within 3 months, and all were successfully treated after 10 months. In this case, the checklist became a life-saving habit. Chapter 7. The 2 types of checklists. When looking at the best checklist to implement in your industry or your specific endeavors, you need to consider the 2 main types. These are read-do checklist and do checklist. A read-do checklist means that you read it and tick off each task as you go through. A do checklist means you do the tasks in the order you know from memory, but you then read the checklist as a final confirmation that you've done everything you need to do. There are 2 main types of checklists, read-do and do. Use both to become more efficient. Gawande visited Daniel Borman from the Boeing Company in Seattle. This is a man who spent more than 20 years developing aviation checklists, and he knows how they work and how they're best created. His advice was to identify which tasks require checklists and which don't. The aviation industry has checklists for a range of situations that may occur or may not, but if they do, the pilot can take out the checklist and know what to do. For instance, if the cargo door on the airplane opens, there's a checklist on how to rectify the situation. The other main point when developing a checklist is to look for a spot at which the checklist can be read and actioned. If you're using a read-do checklist, this will be after every step is completed. At this point, you will decide upon the type of checklist you want to make. In many ways, a checklist is like a recipe. Good checklists, on the other hand, are precise. They are efficient, to the point, and easy to use even in the most difficult situations. Atul Gawande. A checklist should also have no more than 9 items to avoid overwhelming the person reading the list. Did you know? The first aviation checklist was implemented on the 30th of October, 1935. Chapter 8. Atul Gawande's Successful Checklist Trial. Following his research on the use of checklists in various industries, Gawande decided to start trialing different types of checklists in medical situations. A few improvements from checklists he implemented include improvements in the administration of antibiotics, fewer infections, and more effective use of oxygen monitoring during operations, and making sure that the patient was properly prepped before the incision was made. Checklists can make key improvements which could ensure serious and negative outcomes don't occur. Throughout all of this, Gawande found that checklists don't take more time. They save time in rectifying mistakes. Problems were reduced, and another pleasant side effect was that communication was also vastly improved as a result of going through the steps on the checklist. Following the trial, a survey was done on 250 staff, covering various different specialties. 3 months after implanting the trial, 80% of those surveyed said they liked the checklist idea and that it wasn't difficult to use. Whilst improving care safety crucially, they were also asked if they wanted the checklist to be used if they were ever to have an operation, and a huge 93% surveyed said that they did. Chapter 9. You can use checklists in any industry. Checklists can be successful in absolutely any industry. And they can also be used personally too. If you have a task that you need to complete on a regular basis, which is quite complicated as a whole, but simple when you break it down, a checklist could be a good way forward. In this case, you would create your own either read-do or do checklist and work out how many steps you need. The likelihood is that you would opt for a do checklist here, as you wouldn't be planning for specific events in your personal life. However, in industry, read-do checklists can be very useful in reducing the risk of complicated situations. Checklists used in personal situations are normally do checklists. However, read-do checklists are ideal for industry situations that may arise in a potential emergency. Overall checklists are very successful at saving time, saving money, improving communication, reducing errors, and of course, in many industries, saving lives too. When first implementing a checklist, you should expect a certain amount of resistance to the idea. Most people don't think that these lists work, simply because they're so simple and therefore, how are they supposed to have such major effects? However, over time, most people come around to the idea and see the benefits. Implementing a checklist requires patience, as many people are resistant to the idea of something so simple. Perseverance is key. There will be resistance because it seems a simple idea and therefore can't work, but it does, and people come around after seeing the results the first few times. In that case, when implementing a checklist within an industry, patience is key. Conclusion. In life, sometimes the most simple things can avoid a major issue. A checklist is a great example of this. Checklists have been used for decades in the aviation industry, and over the course of the last few years, they have been implemented more and more with great success into the medical field too. There's no industry which can't benefit from using checklists, but it's important to ensure that the checklist is not too long, it's clear enough to follow when under pressure, and that the whole idea isn't overused. You don't need a checklist for everything. You need to identify the best tasks and issues that could benefit. Checklists are also ideal for your personal life, for reducing errors and capturing mental lapses. Checklists may be simple, but they're super effective. Try this. Number 1, identify any situation in your life or your working situation which could benefit from a checklist. Number 2, think about the use in do and redo checklists for future situations which may occur and may require guidance. 3, suggest to your manager or your employees the use of checklists and ask for suggestions.